So hello, welcome again. So this is actually the second recording I'm doing today. This is Alan Weimer, who is the host of Flying High with Flutter, and we have another Manning host on. It's Mariano Mattei. He is the author of Security Metrics, which is a pretty interesting book. We were just talking before the show. Security is always kind of like an afterthought. Usually just before production release, you say, okay, I guess now we have to start using SSL. We got to start encrypting passwords. We got to add a login. We got to do this. We got to do that. So I think this is always a great topic to talk about, no matter what you're doing. And Mariano, maybe you kind of just introduce yourself and just so we know,
Yeah,
who we are, who you are.
sure. Mariano Mattei. I am currently Vice President of Cybersecurity and AI Solutions for a company called Azure Group, not to be confused with Microsoft Azure. Um, I have 30 plus years in IT. First half of my career was as a software engineer, and the second half has been squarely in cybersecurity. However, I never really let go of my software engineering background. So if I see a way to automate or enhance the systems, I usually start coding again. So
Yeah, I know the feeling. It's like sometimes when you start kind of going up the ranks, you have to stop coding so much. But I don't know how it is for you, but sometimes it's like you know already what you want to do, and you just okay, move over. Let me just code this
yeah,
up. It's actually not that
yeah,
difficult, you know.
yeah.
Um,
Especially if you're working for a company that doesn't have a in-house development.
oh
I've
yeah.
done things, say shaving, weeks of work off of by automating processes. So yeah,
So are you like coding up just random utilities that the company needs, or is that what you're saying? You're just kind of like adding more tools to
yeah,
make the
uh,
yeah.
yeah. So one of the other things that I do is I hold innovation workshops. So we used to do this at previous company. We called it Innovation Friday once a month, and we would gamify it. We would bring all the teams in, and and host a bit of a workshop to find ways we can either uh, enhance what we have, create something new. And then we go off and code them as proof of concepts. I do that currently in Azure Group as well. We have, especially with AI now, we have three proof of concepts, two of which have been approved. So they're going into production shortly. Yeah, I mean, there are always ways to make use of new technology to differentiate yourself as a competitor.
But also before we started talking, you said you just did something with Flutter. You were studying it or something.
Oh, I recently graduated from Temple University with a master's in cyber defense and information insurance, and it was one of the finals.
Hmm.
We had to create a web app for something that we developed using AI. So I had just started toying around with Flutter. I wasn't really familiar with it prior, so
I mean, how was your experience with it? Did you enjoy it, or what was your
I I did. I'm a bit old school programmer, so I still use a VI editor, albeit a VS Code now. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was for rapid development. I thought it was a pretty good program.
okay? That's good to hear. Yeah, I also feel it's very easy to do, especially when you like you as soon as you do Control S or Command S, you save the file. It's automatically just kind of running because UI stuff just it's really a pain. You always got to like change something slightly to see how it looks. Okay, it doesn't look so
Right,
nice. Got to change it back or tweak it like
right.
this. And because my first mobile app I did was actually with Objective C for iOS. I was basically voluntold to do this. I don't know if you heard that expression before.
Voluntold, no,
Yeah.
but
So
I'll use
because
that in the future.
yeah, because so my boss at the time was a big open source guy. He's a Dutch guy. I feel like a lot of Dutch people they really into open source. I'm not sure. Maybe that's just my over here how it is. But in any case, he had a Ubuntu machine. He did everything with Python. He was kind of like really like a free open source kind of guy. And I had a Mac. I bought a Mac in university, and I always just kept using them because I felt like I didn't like using Windows, and I wanted something Nixie. And Mac OS just had just much more support. I wanted just to be able to just plug it in and go because I grew up building my own computers, and I know the pain of things not working, drivers out of date, whatever. So just everything working was better for me. Long story short, the client we had an all Mac OS system. Everybody had Mac and iPhones, and he told me, "Oh yeah, we had to build this iOS app for them." And I said, "Okay, great, but who's going to do that?" And what do you mean? What do you mean who? What do you mean who? It's obviously it's you, because
Obviously.
yeah. And I'm like, well, I don't know how to do that. You got to figure it out. So that's kind of been my career, is just figuring stuff out. So
Yeah,
and I just
I mean, I
remember.
think
Go ahead.
that's probably true for most developers, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
like to think we're experts in everything, but uh, as a software engineer, you could probably relate to this. It's really that puzzle to figure out that drives us, right? It's that dopamine that we get when we figure something out, and then it's actually working. We get really excited about it. So, um, yeah, I mean, it's always great to have good problems, as I call them.
Yeah, especially with like figuring something new out like that. That was fun. I really enjoyed it a lot. And then of course I had to do you do iOS and then you have to do Android after that. So that was
Yeah,
it was a fun experience.
yeah.
And that's what kind of led me to Flutter. But kind of coming back to this, right? So yeah, security metrics. I mean, I'd like to hear a little bit more about kind of what the book is about. I saw that you talk about like how you can have like a dashboard that can kind of show you some metrics regarding security. I mean, can you dig a little bit more about like the content of the book, because it is kind
Yeah,
of you know open, right? Security metrics in terms of what it actually means.
yeah, it is open, and so I've been working the last 15 years as a consultant. So I've stood up and or matured cybersecurity programs in numerous companies, fintech, biotech, medtech, um, and one of the things that I see missing mostly was the fact that they had a lot of data that they weren't making use of, which led me to the idea of the book. So I said, well, there has to be a book out on this. So I did some research, and there's a lot of really good books, mathematical books on, like, let's say, how to measure anything in cybersecurity or how to measure anything. Those books are great. A bit heavy on the math end, but it just surprised me that companies have a lot of data just sitting there that they're not really making use of. So when it comes time for the CISO or the CIO to report into the board or to the CEO, um, they're not making use of these numbers. And so I thought to myself, well, a CFO, for example, you would never consider going into a board meeting and not producing, your profit and loss sheets or whatever it is that the accountants do, right? If you want to know how well your company's doing, you have to take a look at these metrics, and then you have to tell a story with those metrics. And I thought, why aren't more CISOs providing these type of reports and dashboards higher up? Where's all the money going that you're spending on cybersecurity? Usually it's a percentage of your IT budget, but it would be nice to know, exactly how that's benefiting the company. How do you tie that back into your business objectives? And that was really the idea of the book. There wasn't anything else out there that I could find. Um, so I had a professor, Derek, who was teaching a class, and he had a relationship with Manning Publishing, and he made a personal introduction, and they liked the idea of the book. So I've been working on it for the past year. Hopefully, it should be out February, if all goes well on the final edit.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty interesting about the information, because I mean I don't know, I kind of went to a lot of startups and we didn't exactly kind of capture all this data, right? So I'd like to hear more about the kind of data that we probably should be capturing, so that way we can, when it does come time to start analyzing it, or maybe even, showing it to board or whatever. Like, what kinds of data do you think would be important related to security, though, that we can start to capture?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'll give you a bit of a story. So I was on an interview, and the CIO asked me. He said, "Oh, you have a book coming out. What are your top 10 metrics?" And I said, I don't have a top 10. He didn't particularly care for the answer. But the reason is that I personally don't have a top 10. But give me a few weeks in your company, and I can tell you what I think your top 10 should be. So the real question is, what is really important to the company? What makes the company money, right? And if you find that, then you start knowing which metrics are really the most important ones. And it's not so much what can you collect initially, it's more about what are you collecting. So what's easily accessible that will add value, that will help you tell the story. So it really depends on what it is that your company does, what your organization does, what makes profit for the company. Um, where are your cybersecurity initiatives? Where are those dollars going towards? Because you may want to be measuring the effectiveness of those initiatives to see what your return on investment is. So it really doesn't come down to what are great metrics, because it changes. It's very different for each individual company. So a software development company would have different metrics than, let's say, a software as a medical device company. So even those two things you would think aren't too far apart, but they really are, because the FDA has new guidelines coming out all the time, and there are other HIPAA requirements and so forth, um, that are going to dictate what's more important to a medical software as a medical device company as opposed to a software company.
Yeah, that's. I mean, and also, so maybe you can give like an example for kind of because well, here's the thing I'm imagining because a lot of people who are doing Flutter are usually kind of like one man band shops, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're probably making some kind of simple app in terms of just collecting data, kind of typical CRUD stuff, right? And usually they also just add some kind of ad mob thing so they can make a little bit of revenue off of it. I mean, you probably already know there's lots of very small, like simple apps that actually make quite a bit of revenue, especially for a single person.
Yeah.
I know you don't like to be kind of specific, but it would be good to have at least some kind of idea for somebody who maybe doesn't quite know what could be interesting data. I mean, should we be logging IPs and then verifying that against like where they could be in the world, and then maybe some of the more kind of outlier kind of countries are more interesting to kind of take a look at. I mean, I'm trying to just think of what could be starting. What would be applicable to kind of smaller places that cannot quite work with you or don't kind of know where they should be kind of collect this kind of data.
Yeah, let's just take it like abstractly from a single person developer using Flutter, for example, right? So in your design, you probably have exactly how you kind of want it to look. You have the functionality, you have what the inputs, the processing, and the outputs are going to be, right? And now you want it to look really good, so you use something like Flutter to spin it up, rapid development, one man development shop, and get it out there and being used. So in all of that is what a software engineer would be doing. However, what's missing is the thought about cybersecurity. So throughout each one of those processes, you have to consider cybersecurity from birth till death, as we say, right? So in every phase of that development, cybersecurity should be top of mind. So we had talked earlier about the bolt-on method, which does not work. It adds to many more bugs and required fixes and vulnerabilities that could spring up. So if you think about it ahead of time, you know what are your goals from a cybersecurity perspective? Now, some of the things that you mentioned were let's talk about the big ones first of all, right? So you're going to have some kind of multi-tenant SaaS application, let's just say, for example. Um, you're going to want to include MFA. You're going to want to include not storing your passwords in the clear, or transmitting them in the clear. So there's things like that, like from that, just that from that initial implementation and dealing with your clients, you have to start thinking about cybersecurity. And then some of the things that you were talking about, I tend to think of more of like statistics or logging for auditing purposes. So if your application is only to be used within the United States, you probably should have some functionality built in to not allow other countries to be able to access that, right? Unless you're considering the fact that maybe, let's say, for example, you have users that travel that make use of your software. So let's say to right now at 10:17, I'm logging in, and my IP address is from the United States, and then in 20 minutes I'm logging in from some other country, right? It's impossible to make that trip. And so that should set off a flag, right? You should be monitoring for things like that, and reporting on things like that. Let's say you want to log how many times a user logs in before you lock them out, right? So I have a lot of websites that I create and that I manage, and I've got very strict rules about logging in. If you log in and you get the username wrong, you're locked out for 3 months. I mean, it's extreme, right? And that's not even for an application. That's because a lot of these websites are just constantly being pinged by hackers looking for the latest vulnerability to try to exploit it. So I don't really give them much any leeway. So it's things like that you have to consider. What you actually measure and what you record is a part of that. So as you're designing your software, let's just take that initial user login. You should be storing that information somewhere. You should be setting up some kind of alert mechanism to say this seems suspicious. You should check it out, and or block this user, and or force a password reset for that user, or something to intervene, so the hackers can't sit there and just take their time, and try things one after the other. For example, trying the password over and over and over again should be a red flag. So it's things like that, and I don't mind talking about, like, if you give me a specific example, I can give you specific metrics that I think are important. But again, it comes down to your design, your thought process, and thinking about cybersecurity from birth till death of your product, and implementing those metrics that make sense to you, right? So it's not a one-stop shop. It's not always the same metrics. There are some commonalities, but for the most part, it comes down to the developer really keeping cybersecurity as top of mind, and not definitely not bolting it on afterwards. So
Yeah, you just actually brought something to my memory. I went to something about, I don't know, 6 months ago or so, where people are using AI to kind of take in some of, like, ingest some of this data, and they were basically doing what you're doing. It's like, well, how does somebody log in from, like you said, one location to another, and then there's like this. Is it called shift left? I always forget between shift left, shift right, where it's like they take a preemptive measure and say, oh, something's not right. Yeah, shift left, and lock them out. And there was quite a few other things too, right? And you said you're working with AI, so
yeah,
so
so
we can start to actually employ AI to kind of handle these kind of things for us. No.
yeah, absolutely. Certainly, the AI is a double-edged sword, right? So you can certainly use it for your analysis, but for sure, hackers are making use of it. So I've written AI programs that will actually help me conduct penetration testing. So it'll tell me what to do next. It'll analyze the data. It'll give me the results. It'll tell me what it finds and what I should try next. I mean, AI without a doubt is the future. It's going to affect everything in every industry. So you should definitely consider making use of that sooner rather than later. How you use it differs. There's a lot of talk, whether you use agentic, whether you code it yourself, or whether you use agents. That's a whole nother book right there. Um, but in terms of collecting and analyzing, for sure, you can make use of AI because it can scan massive amounts of data in an instant that would take you a little bit more time. For example, you can send in logs, that user login data. You can send in those logs to an AI, and ask it to run some analysis on there and see if there's anything suspicious, and it'll give you pretty good results from that very, very quickly.
I was just thinking, is it possible for us to actually use AI to scan our code and figure out like what kinds of things we should be, recording?
Yeah, do you mean you could use it in several ways? So one, obviously, I mean, if you're not using AI to help you code, you're going to quickly fall behind, because I could tell you, uh, again, I'm a software engineer. I love to code. Making use of AI to help me code is like having three other engineers at my disposal. I don't think it's gotten to the point now where it's a single prompt and you get a full stack development as promised by a lot of these other applications. I haven't seen that. I really do think that you need. I don't think coding is dead. I'm not subscribing to that because you still need a software engineer to run the AI to help get you where you need to be. And without that critical thinker at the helm, if you will, I don't see AI yet. I don't see AI being able to do that really, really well. It seems to get stuck, in my experience, on things um, that I have to get creative in my prompt engineering to really get AI to go around that problem and fix it the way that I want it to be fixed. So yeah, you could use it for helping you code. You can use it for helping you design. You can certainly use it to help test the code, especially for unit testing. It's incredible at that. Penetration testing, incredible at that. You can feed it to OWASP top 10 and have it run all of those for you. Yeah, I mean, you should absolutely be using it. It certainly, especially if you're a one person shop as a software engineer, that's your best friend right there.
Which, I mean, what kind of AI should we be looking at? Like, which specific model? Because now we have this whole, was it deep something? I forgot the name of the Chinese one.
DeepSeek, DeepSeek
Deep speak,
R1
deep
is
seek.
the latest. Yeah, I mean, DeepSeek was always pretty competitive, even with version 3. It was actually pretty good. I would run a lot of tests between DeepSeek and OpenAI just to see, who would give me the better results. It was hit or miss, but overall, I was going with OpenAI for a number of reasons. One, it's a US based company, and privacy for me is top of mind. So, for example, as a cybersecurity practitioner, I don't have Twitter installed on my phone. I don't want my kids installing it on their phone, although they'll do what they want. Um, I wouldn't install DeepSeek application on my phone either. But if you want to download and run the model locally, you can certainly do that. So which model to use really depends on your use case. And what I found is that it really does come down to, or before the self thinking models, it really came down to prompt engineering. So you couldn't, for example, run a scenario where you have a prompt, you've engineered a prompt, you feed that into OpenAI, then you feed that into Meta, and then you feed that into DeepSeek, and then compare the results because it's not an apples to apples comparison. Each model has its own finesse, if you will, in the software engineering portion of it. So one trick to get around that is to actually use that model to help you generate the prompt, which then it gets a little bit better at it. But you'll notice that the prompts are very, very different depending on what model you're using. In my company, all of the proof of concepts are done using local open source models only, because this way we don't have to worry about cybersecurity or privacy initially. And then when we go to production, that's when we start thinking about cybersecurity and privacy, because now we have to host it somewhere, right? But if we keep it local, no internet connection, we can test out the program, see if it runs. We know all of our data stays local. And depending on what model we use, it depends on exactly what we're doing. So for open source, I've had a lot of success between Meta and Mistral. Mistral being slightly favored, in my opinion, for some of the things that we're doing. It had a little bit better reasoning, at least. We were more compatible in my prompt engineering style with Mistral than it was for Meta or so I mean, it really does depend. I have not played with R1 locally yet. I was actually just doing research to see what would run. I have a pretty good machine here with a 4090 RTX running. So I don't know what model would give me the optimal performance output, so it's not too slow with, how well the model actually performs. I haven't really played with R1 yet.
Okay. Um, So before we go off on a tangent about the AI
Yeah.
stuff, I did see in a book you talk a little bit more about governance, right? With permissions and things like that. I'd like to kind of talk a little bit more about that because that one is interesting, right? Because if you look at these larger companies, they are pretty much on the ball in terms of like who has access to what. Because even like the CEO of, say, Apple may not actually have access to all of the stuff that's happening, right? Because in terms of like, okay, well, this guy doesn't really need access to all these things, right? And I think that's an important thing to talk about because, like, in terms of being compromised, right? So if somebody was compromised and they are at a higher position, it probably is good that they actually don't have access to every single thing in their department, or is this something that you think is maybe overkill in terms of like kind of starting to secure your business?
No, I don't think it's overkill at all. I mean, not even the CEO should have access to everything, right? You should only have access to what you need to do your job on a daily basis. You really shouldn't have access to anything else. So that really, comes down to how you're organizing your users and their roles. But definitely you don't want me to have access to financial data, right? If I'm a programmer, for example, um, you don't want me to have access to anything that falls outside of what I do on a daily basis. So I don't think that that's overkill at all. I mean, that's that's user permissions 101. Um, so what's interesting now though is without at least an AI policy at your company, um, the policy would say what we expect from you as an employee, what you should not be putting into any AI model that's outside of our control. Um, the funny thing is that a lot of these compromises, are they really are they really, can you even tell that you've been compromised? So for example, if I'm an employee and I say, oh, like I'm getting addicted to ChatGPT now, I'm going to just have it help me do my job every day, which is great if you're controlling the data. However, if you're putting information from your company into that model, um, there are there are governance documents that say they're not going to use that data to retrain the model. They're not going to, the problem is that do you know, are they still storing all of that data somewhere? So letting a company proprietary information out into the wild in any form or fashion may not be realized as a breach or a security incident until much later, because you don't know how that data is being stored or used. So in general, the rule of thumb is, you wouldn't put anything into ChatGPT or any other AI model that you wouldn't, post on Instagram or Facebook or make public in some way. So for me, uh, especially if you do the analysis and read the terms of and conditions of use for some of the Chinese owned applications like DeepSeek R1 and or um, um, what's the one that just got the name's escaping me, um, the app that just got banned and then was brought back and might get banned again. Um, so they have access to pretty much everything. Um, they can make use of your microphone. They can make use of your camera. They can read all of your chats. I mean, if you read it and then you do the analysis on it, there were some studies done where they watch the phone install, these apps, and then you can see the data throughput, and it's pretty much everything that's on your phone. So you've given away not only your rights but anybody that's around you, because it's a recording device, right? So you know governance in terms of let's say a US based organization, in terms of what you should be using AI for, should be very restrictive. um, and it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter if you have the ability to block it from, let's say, my company laptop. I can't access OpenAI, which is fine. There's always ways around that, because you have a personal cell phone. You can now take a picture of anything that's on your screen, and AI will analyze it and know what it is. So there's no way to really squash it completely. Um, so I think a really good, strong policy and user training is important in that regards.
Yeah, that's also true. Sorry, I did have a question that came up in my mind, but now it suddenly is it's eluding me. It came up to me because I was just browsing through your book as you were chatting.
Hmm.
I think it's related to more about the access management, right? Too.
Yeah.
You were talking about like making sure that you don't have these things. What about, like you said, also kind of analyzing, you know, what people are doing? Because we just talked about, okay, restricting it, but things can always get overlooked. Now, what
Yeah.
people are doing with certain things, how long they're spending on certain times. I mean, are these kind of metrics we should also be kind of looking at to see if there's something weird? Because I've been watching movies recently because I have a little bit more free time, and yeah, there's always these people that are they hop into a computer when somebody else is not around, and they start browsing files for things for personal reasons, and so now I'm starting to wonder maybe we should also be looking at metrics like that, like what kinds of records are they looking at, relating back to maybe what kinds of work they're actually doing, and start to see is something not quite making sense over here.
Yeah, I mean, a few things. One, from a cybersecurity perspective, a company provisioned laptop, let's say, should have restrictions built in that don't allow you to access restricted sites, that do not give you admin privileges, so you can't install anything or have anything installed without your knowledge. Um, there's a lot of talk about that that internal threat, because what is it? At least a third of all breaches happen internally. Um, so can you monitor every single thing a person is doing? All your employees? Probably not practical, right? But you can put in some restrictions to make it, either whether they're doing it on purpose or by accident, make it a lot harder for them to get in trouble. But one of the things I always say is, if your employee can click on a button and take down your servers, you're doing something wrong, or it just shouldn't be possible. I shouldn't be able to click on an email link and be able to do anything that compromises the entire company. So, from a cybersecurity, from a CISO perspective, that company's really not doing something. They're doing something wrong. Um, but yeah, should you be monitoring for things like that, and should you be flagging things like that? My answer would be yes, with the caveat being, you do at some point have to really trust your employees. But if you can eliminate those mistakes happening, I think you should do everything you can to avoid those at all cost.
Now you kind of got me thinking about. There's been a couple of times I actually ran into a situation at least more than a half a year ago where somebody was started WhatsApping the company phone number, and they had my photo. They put my name with founder on it, and luckily that day, my admin was sick. Otherwise, she's usually the one that mans the phone, and I picked up the phone. And I'm like, this is really interesting. I feel kind of honored actually. Somebody tried to be me and tried to scam me because that means I have somebody actually sees value in me. So that's good.
Right.
I felt really good. Yeah, yeah. So and of course they're asking for ridiculous amount of money in Google Play cards, and
Yeah.
said, "Don't call me. Don't all these kind of things. Don't call me. I'm in a meeting. Just do it." And then I started asking questions. Why? Why should I do this, boss? This kind of stuff, this kind of tone. Oh, do you
Right.
still want to work here? This kind of pushes and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I just kind
Yeah.
of want to take a side. I mean, obviously, it's not exactly in your book, this kind of stuff, but I think it's a good thing to talk about. Is these kinds of scamming things. Do you think there's a really good method that we could use to make sure that we how do you say this, that we can verify it is that who we're talking to is who we're talking to, right? Because it really is a tactic to kind of pretend you're somebody else and then push that it's important and act like there's no time to waste, which then causes people not to think, right, and just act because they don't want to do the wrong thing. Do you have any kind of advice for this kind of thing? Because I think this can happen. I mean, it happened to me. I'm really surprised it happened to me. So
Yeah,
I'd like to hear like your thoughts on this since you're in that area.
it happens a lot, and there are statistics, metrics that you can collect on this. So you can do dark web searches to see if your name, email, title is out there either in chats or other means. It can get expensive. There are ways to code it yourself, but that takes a bit of expertise to be able to do that. So you should be collecting metrics on that to see how many of your company's um, employee data, employee email, and so forth are out there on the dark web, because that's how a lot of those things start, right? Once they get your phone number. When I first started working here, um, or pretty much any new company I interact with, I start getting the text messages from the CEO and asking for the Amazon gift cards or whatever. That should be your flag. So for me, there's no way to get around that. I never answer my phone unless I recognize the number and they're part of my contacts. So it goes right to voicemail, and then I can just mark it as junk. So that's my number one rules: don't answer the phone if you don't know if you don't know the number. They'll either text you or write you back. And two is proper training. So you have to really go with your gut. They're getting more and more sophisticated, especially with deepfake being, so easily, now anybody can create a deepfake. So voice is very, very simple to mimic. So even voice calls now are very difficult to discern. The phone number is very difficult to discern because I can give you an example. I got a call just 3 days ago from my mortgage company, and they started asking me, some personal information, and I didn't answer any of it. And I said, I'll have to call you back. And they said, fine. But on my caller ID, it was the number. And then when I dialed the number directly, they said, no, we've got no record of anybody contacting you. We have no reason to contact you. So, common sense is and proper training is number one. But they're getting more and more sophisticated, and soon you're not going to be able to tell the difference for video. I mean, right now we're still in that uncanny valley, if you will, for deep fake videos where something just looks off. So if it ever does do that, better to decide on the side of caution and not give out any information or do anything. I'll tell you one funny story. My son got a new job, and then he has the glass conference room, and then he got a text from his CEO and said, "Hey, what are you doing? Are you busy? I need you to go to the store and grab some cards for me. I'm in a meeting right now and I want to reward the people for doing a good job." So he looks over through the glass, sees the CEO sitting there on his phone. So, I mean, it looks legitimate, right? But my son goes and he's looking for like what kind of cards, like a congratulations card. He's in the wrong section, obviously, right? And so the scammer now posing as the CEO starts getting upset with him, and he's like, not like the Hallmark cards section, but like the Amazon cards. And that's when he called me and he was like, "What should I do?" And I was like, "Yeah, this is a complete scam. There's no way. If anybody sends you anywhere to do anything via gift card, it's a scam. So better to piss off your actual CEO than take a chance and put everything on, pay for it out of pocket and get caught like that."
At the beginning, I didn't really understand like why gift cards, but now I understand it's basically like they sell them for pennies on a dollar. It's easy to get rid of this kind of stuff. You just hand over the thing. Um, but I to me like I just can't understand like why would somebody ask you to buy thousands of dollars worth of Google Play cards and especially like when it's like okay IRS says you owe them $12,000 but they'll accept $6,000 worth of Google Play cards. Like why does that make sense in your
Doesn't
mind?
it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's really
And
bonkers.
I'll give you a tip on the latest scam, right? Is actual cards. So what they're doing now is they hire people to go steal the cards. They take the cards back to their shop. They somehow grab the numbers off of those cards, and then they have the people put the cards back. So you go, you grab the card, you put your money down on the card. They cash that card in before you have a chance to spend it, and then you're out the money. So it's an interesting scam. So Why they don't have these cards back behind, the counter where it's locked and protected somewhat, I don't know. But that's the latest scam that's running rampant right now through the United States. So you could literally buy a card, put money on it, send it to somebody as a gift, and when they try to use it, it's empty.
Yeah, I think I've heard this one.
Yeah.
So we actually do have a question in the audience. I'm just added to the screen. I'll just read that for those who are just listening on audio. They ask, how about Apple AI? It can basically access to everything on your phone, all your emails, messages, etc. Do you think there's any security problems?
I don't know. I can tell you what my gut tells me. So Apple historically has been very privacy centric. I don't know. I don't know if that means that, for example, they won't collect and sell. Um, but I would be surprised if they're not collecting. And we've all experienced this, and it's not just Apple. We're talking to a friend about needing new socks, and all of a sudden, the ads within 30 seconds are showing up for socks all across your multiple different social media accounts, right? So, is there any way around that? Don't use a phone. And who's going to do that, right? So we kind of, in a way, we trade off that functionality for knowing that someone somewhere is actually collecting all of our information. Um, so I don't know that there's any way around it. I can tell you this: in the United States, if they get caught at doing something like that, at the very least, there are other ways that we can be compensated through class action lawsuits, and or have them fined heavily um, to kind of change their ways. So at least in the US based company, there are some ways that we can get justice, if you will. If it's a third world country that we have no jurisdiction over, there's absolutely nothing we can do.
Yeah, that's what kind of makes me start to wonder is, sorry. Actually, I remember I told you about the question a while ago. It actually just came back to me right now, but it's fleeting. It's starting to escape my mind through my ears, maybe. Um, I think the another really interesting question that comes up sometimes is also kind of related to governance in terms of kind of restricting access to data. Something, I mean, so people always want to feed like basically all of their information into this into an AI, and have people just query this thing with a prompt or whatever means. Now, how do you have any like thoughts or even ideas to kind of protect people in terms of how can we make sure that people don't have access to data they shouldn't have? Because some things are related to others, and it's easy to start pulling information out that's kind of related. If you could say like, okay, let me just throw this example out because this is the most recent one that came to my mind. Is that new Chinese AI? I forgot the name again. You know the name.
Deep, yeah,
Yeah.
deep R1.
So people are trying to query information like what happened, back the things that we shouldn't be knowing about, and can you tell me about, Xi Jinping? And it says, no, I can't do that. No, I can't do that. But then um, they did ask questions and they're actually able to get some information from the AI by asking kind of a roundabout way. Now, that's just an example. But if you think about your own company data, if it's just sucking in all the information, how can we start to guard ourselves so that way we don't start leaking information to people that shouldn't know? Or even if we open up our AI and we say, okay, you can query for information, make sure that you're not getting information about other customers or maybe our own revenue, so that way you don't know what we're doing. I mean, I guess you get that general idea, right? My question. So
Sure.
basically, about how to kind of guard us so that way we're not leaking data to the wrong people.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the first one is don't use a publicly available model where you're uploading things into the cloud, if you will. If you want to be able to use a RAG system, talk to your own documents, you can do that, and you can do that in separate instances. So, for example, HR would have their own set of documents that they can talk to. Employees would have their own set of documents that they could talk to. Customers can have their own set of documents that they could talk to, all within locally run open source models that you have complete control over, if you will. Now, how to prevent jailbreaking? That's interesting because we had computer and AI interaction course last semester, where we ran experiments just like that, right? The one example that you were talking about was where you can ask the AI to do something or give you information that would typically be termed illegal. And then there's ways around that, right? So you can say, well, I'm working on a movie, and in the movie, I want to show how to do something illegal. And then, that breaks the AI. Or you can say something as simple as, in the past, how would we do this illegal thing? And then for some reason, that tricked the AI into giving out this information. So it really comes down to what controls you have in place in your prompting to try to avoid things like that. There's 100 stories out there now, right? There's the customer support AI bot that someone tricked it into giving them, extreme discounts on products and things like that. So, you have to use caution. You have to do proper unit testing. You have to monitor these things and collect information on these types of events. That's really going back to the book and collecting metrics for things to really be able to tell a story. Um, you should be thinking about that when you're designing it.
What else is also interesting too is since we're talking about like AI and things like that, you spun us on a tangent. We kept going with this AI stuff. I
Yeah,
guess we'll
no
probably.
worries. AI does that.
I actually saw this very super interesting video recently. There's a lawyer who was talking about technology, things like that. And he's talking about the new version of Microsoft Word is actually kind of throwing law firms in a little bit of a problem because Microsoft is getting conflicting answers about Copilot. So now Microsoft Word and Office is including Copilot, and the question is, okay, um, so this is actually not even related to governance per se in terms of who can access the data, but it's more so about which project can have access to which data from another project. So when you're working on multiple clients, right? A lawyer may have multiple clients at the same time.
Yeah.
And some data you can obviously reuse. Say maybe it's a general contract, I suppose. You can probably copy, paste, change. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just taking guesses over here. But there definitely is some confidential data per client or per project that you cannot have access to. And what the big problem was happening in the lawyer scene with terms of this copilot is that now it's like, well, can I turn this thing off? Because actually, if I can't trust, it's going to be able to know which things it can know about, which things it cannot. In terms of when I'm working on one document and it's referencing another, this kind of stuff is a
Right.
little bit kind of freaky. I mean, do you have any kind of like thoughts about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's situations like that really that build in new functionality, right? So that's a problem maybe they didn't think about ahead of time, which maybe they should have. Um, so let's say that there isn't a way right now to restrict Copilot to the document you're working on only. Um, maybe you have the CISO or the CIO determine that they're not ready to really implement that functionality into Word. And there is a way to shut it off completely. There isn't obviously a way to implement the functionality that you need for your firm. But then you can go back to Microsoft and have that conversation. And then I would imagine that they would jump on something like that to fix it. You can either have them fix it and wait to implement it into your office and into your organization, or shut it off completely. Because there isn't, and the real question really for me is, does Copilot know about that other company from the data it was already trained on, or does it know it from your internal documents? That's the real question. So if there was somehow documents that were used in the training process that it shouldn't have had access to, which we're finding now has been the case, where did it actually come from, and is there any way around that at all? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions that pop in my mind about this kind of stuff, but we
Yeah,
cannot
it's
go
great.
on.
Great time to be in cyber and AI. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, with the AI stuff and everybody wanting to pump everything into I guess that's kind
Yeah.
of like another thing that people should start to think about is, how much data should you be pumping into AI? How should you be putting into AI? Like you said, maybe it's better if you segregate this model for this department, this one for that one, this much data goes into here.
Yeah.
At what point, it's really tricky. Of course, you probably have no silver bullet answer like, okay, just do this and your life is done, right? It just really just depends on the situation.
No, but it's what's funny. One of the good things that really came out of the whole DeepSeek R1 scenario is that they were really smart about how they trained this model for so cheap. And one of the ways that they did that was by having the model develop the data to be trained upon. Um, even, I mean, I would, at some point we need this piece of knowledge to feed it, but rate that data.
I think I had a bad connection for a second again. So do you mind just to kind of summarize that one? I'm sorry about that.
No worries. No, I was saying that one of the good things that came out of the DeepSeek R1 in the research paper is how they went about training the model. So they had the AI generate a lot of the data that the model was then trained on. So the question is, do we really need to kind of be unethical and make use of proprietary data anymore in order to train these models? Probably using this new method, not. So it might be better to not make use of any type of proprietary information or copywritten information that could get companies into trouble, and just go with the new method. Going back, and I don't know if I got cut off, but my concern was Copilot already trained on that other company's information, or did it actually come from the law firm's internal documentation? That's my first question. Because if it was already trained on that information, then there's no way really to segregate that data out. Um, Maybe with proper prompt engineering, I could be wrong, but is it pulling that information from your internal documents, or has it already been trained on those documents? And then the question is, how did they get those documents, and was that legal? I don't know.
My understanding is that I believe it's like at one. That's the thing. That was actually part of the problem. So somebody at Microsoft, I believe, I have to look it up again to be 100% for sure, is said something like, well, if you open up a document, you use it, you close it, you open up another one, you use it. We can actually use the one you already opened it before, or we scan your hard drive, something like that. And then there was another reply from obviously from Microsoft again saying, no, 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 actually, we look in the same folder, or like there was this. That was actually part of the problem too, is that it wasn't quite clear from rep to rep what the actual answer was, and how you can even turn off. And actually, from that video, if I remember correctly, they said that actually you cannot turn it off. It's some kind of
Yeah,
feature that's built in, and you can't even turn it off. And kind of a side thing with that too, right? I think you've probably seen the new ARM computers that are coming out. They already have Copilot in them too,
yeah,
in terms of like they're just constantly snapping screenshots, and I believe initially they weren't even encrypting them, which is a little bit interesting. And then I think now
yeah.
they finally got that under control, but still, I mean that's also a bit scary too, right? That it's just, I mean, imagine
Absolutely.
pumping in your email, so you pump in your password, you're not quite sure, you click on show my password, snap, that could be very bad news, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I know we're
Yeah.
coming up on the hour here. You had mentioned about
Yeah, yeah.
exiting Grace.
Yeah, yeah. I trust me. I'm definitely keeping a look at that. But we got stuck on the AI track. I feel like
Yeah.
you should have just skipped the security metrics book and just talked about AI and security. I think would have
There's
been
plenty. There's plenty of books on AI coming out, and
yeah,
it takes about a year really to get a book published if you're not doing it yourself. Um, and by the time you start writing something on AI, think about how fast we're moving. In a year, you would never be able to keep up. So there are a lot of books out. They can quite quickly become irrelevant at the pace in which we're moving.
yeah. That is. I mean, with all technology, but I think even like you said, even with AI, it's probably even more so. For some weird reason, there's a new algo or something out every bit. And now you have the 50 series GPUs coming out. And you said you have a 4090, so now you're going to get the 5090, I suppose, if you even can.
If you can. The funny
Yeah.
thing is, I thought the 4090s would get reduced in price, but you know that
No.
historically that's never been the case.
Yeah. They
Prices
they
have gone up.
they never really gotten a MSRP, I think, for 4090 series, if I remember correctly. Maybe now they might be, or soon.
Probably. The prices have gone up, but NVIDIA historically has never reduced the price of previous models when a new model came out. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, I mean, well, now with AI, I mean, how can a GPU get any cheaper? Really? Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
so,
yeah. Think about what is it? Um, their Jensen $3,000. It's like 1,000 times more powerful than than your home GPU. So I mean, things are just changing so rapidly.
well,
Um,
now they may even be double the price now if things
yeah, they've
happen.
gone up. 4090s have gone up.
No, what I'm talking about with there may be in U.S. A tariff. I think Trump just talked
True,
about that with TSMC in Taiwan for some reason.
possibly.
Yeah, so I mean,
Who
yeah, so
knows?
I game a bit here and there. That's why I'm looking at
Same,
GPUs. So
same.
so when I heard you had a 4090, I was a bit sad. I don't have one yet, but I don't have a I don't think I don't have a powerful enough what's it called power supply to handle a 4090,
Power
to be
supply.
honest.
I just
And I
upgraded
definitely
my.
don't have a big enough case for it. So I bought a pre-built because,
Yeah,
like I said, I don't want to deal with it. But
I
that's
thought
some
I got a
others.
big enough case, but it's still very difficult to get my fat hands in there. So
Oh yeah, that's another thing. That's what always
yeah,
stresses me about building. Before, it wasn't a stress because my father helped me with all this stuff. But when I'm doing it myself, it's like I have to go over there and measure everything, and I'm like, I don't really trust myself with coding. How can I trust myself with measuring something?
yeah,
You know?
definitely not my strong suit, but I got it done. So
Did you have to saw anything off your GPU or crack something off or anything like that? Because
no, mm-mm.
okay, that's
No, no,
good.
no, barely fit. Yeah,
Yeah. I actually had to use well I didn't have to saw something off. My brother sawed off something off his GPU, like some
mm,
design thing on it. And for me,
right.
I actually had to use a screwdriver and take off a piece of some extra plastic stuff
Oh
just to make
wow,
it look nice for a 3090. But that broke,
mm,
and I just bought a 4070 Ti Super when those kids came out. That was a good investment. It's much better than a 3090.
yeah,
Um, and speaking of the, sorry, just a side question since we're
yeah.
talking about GPUs now. How do you feel about the 5090? Do you think it should actually be a 4090 Ti or actually a 5090?
Yeah, I mean, it sounded great when they first announced it, but then if you look at the actual specs, what are you really getting? What is it like a 20, maybe at best a 20% increase in performance? I don't know. Um, so I don't know. I want to see when they come out and we actually run some tests to see how good it is. Um, I think for gaming, it's probably a pretty noticeable increase, but maybe for like a lot of the things that I do in AI, it might not be worth the price tag.
Yeah, I've been following some of the reviews, and yeah, they basically said like even if you get it, it's not that much better than the 4090 in terms of like gaming performance. And then they said you really need to have a really decent CPU, or else you're just going to be CPU bottlenecked no matter what. Because it's just it's really a really good GPU, but not that much better. It's like
Right.
8 to 13% better, which
Yeah,
not that great,
wasn't
but
huge. Yeah, if it was like 50% better, I would say, yeah, let's do it. But I don't know.
yeah.
We'll see. We'll see what they do.
So so then you saw the thing that says something like, what does it say, 47 or sorry 5070 is like twice as fast as a 4090? Did you see that one?
I saw that one. I didn't believe it, so I want to I want
I
to
was
see
like,
the
that's nice. I want to
data.
upgrade.
Data. Yeah,
I
I
s-
mean, when you think about that, I do a lot of film work, which is why I need the 4090 because we're
yeah.
dealing with 8K footage, and when you see twice as fast, you're like, oh, maybe it's worth $3,000, but it's not.
No, that's because you use one is multi. I think that what they did was like they took a 4090 and then didn't do multi-frame generation, and then they took the one that did multi-frame and said, yeah, it's twice
Look,
as fast in frame in FPS. Well, yeah, of course.
right, right.
But Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so we definitely reached the end of our time. I feel like we didn't talk so much about the kind of the core of your book, but maybe it would be good if we kind
Now
of
we
like
got it
wrap up.
out there.
Did we?
Yeah,
Okay. Well, it
yeah,
would still be
yeah,
good to kind of talk, maybe give a last kind of word if you have something last that you want to kind of say to people out there about security,
yeah.
and now that we're talking about AI and also anything else in terms of when they're working on their apps.
Really, how do you what to collect and why are really the two most often asked questions from me, and it's always pretty much the same. So start off simple. What do you have available? What don't you have to spend a lot of money to collect? What are you collecting already? Typically, you'll find that there's a whole lot of data that you're collecting that you could come up with some really interesting metrics and analysis on that data to be able to report back and or create a dashboard that will tell a story. And that's really the crux of it, right? How do you tell a story with your data? So know where your money's going, know how that folds back into your company's business objectives. Make sure you're putting money in the right places. I mean, in essence, that's how I would sum it up. It's not as easier said than done, obviously, but then you can read the book, and I give a lot of real world examples and scenarios that play out. So it's certainly not every metric ever, possibly that you could record, but it follows a lot of the baseline, I would call it, metrics, if you will, that companies should be recording.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I believe in when we do release the show, we should have a coupon code for your book, so people want to buy
Oh,
it. As I
great.
always say, make sure people go to Manning.com to buy the book if they're interested in this book. 'Cause puts a lot more money in your guys' pocket, instead of going to Jeff Bezos to fly to, I don't know, Mars again for whatever he's doing.
Yeah,
So
nice vacation to Mars, right?
yeah, and you have another 5090 to buy soon, maybe.
We'll see.
So yeah, so it's great to have you on. Hopefully, have you on again in the
Yeah,
future for your next book.
sure,
And
absolutely.
yeah, it's good to see you.
All right, thank you so much.